Welcome to Career in Ruins, where this week we're going behind the camera. Hello, Derek. How are you? All right?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm really excited about today's podcast, but I'll keep stum on that for a minute.
Yeah, hold your excitement back. Hold your excitement back. How have you been? How's your week been?
It's been brilliant. I've had a great week, and I've been on a bit of a high since our last podcast, to be honest. The last one, obviously, Jim Leary, really interesting guy and an inspirational guy. And I started to read his book. I say read his book in an ironic sort of way because I'm listening to his audiobook on my commute, and it is absolutely wonderful. I kind of regret not listening to it before we spoke to him now and being a bit more prepared. But it's I'm 2 chapters in and it's great. Its only drawback, and this is a small one, is it keeps making me think, which is problematic when you're trying to listen to an audiobook, because the last thing you want to do is go off on a mental tangent and then minutes later you're pages down the line and you don't know what the hell's going on. But it's a fantastic read, and it's been really interesting, and it got me thinking about podcasting. It got me thinking about well-being and mental health and sort of the positive things that we do in life. And I think this series of Career in Ruins has given me a bit of that buzz across the board. It's reignited, I think, my love of making the podcast and my love of doing Career in Ruins, but also how lucky we are. And I'm going to use luck despite some of our recent controversies with the term, because we are lucky, and we get to, of an evening, what is it, Tuesday evening now, 7 o'clock, I've got a small glass of scotch in front of me. We get to talk to amazing people and hear amazing things. And I hadn't realized how big a impact that has on me as a human being. And as I say, I went down a bit of a mental rabbit hole on this commute listening to Jim Leary's book. And it got me thinking about mental health and how people deal with various stresses. And as you know, Lawrence, but our listeners probably don't, I have my fair share of mental health issues. I have depression. I take medication to get through it. And I'm doing all right with all of that. But the podcast really helps. And I suppose thinking about that against the backdrop of things like Matthew Perry recently and Robin Williams and people who kind of create and do joyous, happy things, but also struggle with demons. It just got me thinking about how lucky we are to have this outlet to have an evening of joy a week, which is great. And it just, brings me lots of happiness. So that's my thought for the week. How about you?
That's lovely. That's really lovely sentiment. And I love it, mate. I love it. And it's the pleasure of hanging out with my best bud and making great arguably great media. I'll say it's great media, but other people might have.
Let's just
opinions.
Say
media, and hanging out with my pal, also with the scotch, but a few tens of miles away down the road. But the sentiment is fantastic. So on the theme of luck and on that controversy around those comments that we had, I was watching the new Brawn series on Disney Plus the other week. I don't know I know you're an F1 fan, and there was one comment in there which actually encapsulates exactly what what I think we mean when we say you make your own luck. And it was something Ross Brawn says, and he says that that luck is preparation waiting for an opportunity, and I quite like that as a theme. So luck is luck, and you can say nothing about it. And I completely understand that stating that making your own luck is a privileged position in many circumstances. But often what we see with the people that we interview is that they have prepared and they've gone the extra mile, and they're ready to take opportunities and ride their luck, make the most of their luck when it comes to them.
I think that's one thing we've, again, part of the lucky and privileged position we're in to do this podcast is we can see themes throughout all of these amazing careers and similarities in all of the many people we talk to, that what they may see as luck is actually lots and lots of preparedness, and even chatting to Helen a few weeks ago, she claimed to be the luckiest person in the world, but it was following on from huge amounts of preparation, reading, planning, thoughtfulness, ready to take that opportunity when it presented itself. So I yeah, I'm a big fan of that quote, and I'm going to sit down and watch that. Although, how's Keanu Reeves?
It is a bit wooden, but I mean, it's Formula One, so it's fine.
I mean,
Anyway, what's going on?
What is going on? We should podcast, really. That's enough from us, right?
Yeah, unless you had another insightful follow-up. Sorry.
No, I was purely going to say I was going to go down a F1 podcast route, but I know that's not us. But I will say that's one of my favourite F1 seasons in the modern history of F1. It was such a good year and a great championship for Jenson Button.
It's not been that good since.
Yeah, arguably. Anyway, enough from us, enough nonsense. We have a guest today, and it's a guest I've been looking forward to since you mentioned it, since you did the booking, Lawrence. Today we are joined by one of our dearest, closest friends and colleagues, who is a documentary producer and director specializing in archaeology and history. Some might say an archaeological storyteller. And her list of production credits are extensive. I don't know which ones to start with. Some of ones that have leapt out at me: Titanic, Case Closed, Lost Worlds, Into the Unknown, Secrets of Stonehenge, Digging for Britain, but best of all, arguably, Time Team. And that's, of course, where we met the brilliant Karen Kirk. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Hello. Hi, chaps. How you doing? Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Karen, it's so good to have you with us this evening, and thank you for giving up your time. And as Derek says, I've been looking forward to hearing this for some time now, because we in Career in Ruins try to bring such a breadth of different careers in our profession, and they can focus on finds, they can focus on academia, they can focus on heritage management, a whole host of different things. But what is fascinating talking to you while we're in the field and doing projects is your career in ruins. And I know that you have an archaeology degree, but you're not in a traditional sphere of archaeology and heritage, and we can't wait to hear more about your career in ruins. So please just go for it. Tell us about how you got to where you are today.
Well, like many people, I think it's not really that straightforward, because I've been an archaeologist, so an archaeologist for Museum of London, but I've also done a huge lot of TV. But it was really difficult to break into it, to be honest. I've always had a love of history. I kind of, when you invited me on, I kind of hark back to trying to think when that was. And really, I think, the moment came probably when I was about 7 or 8. Probably like most people, Pompeii. Everybody loves a bit of Pompeii, the standard school project. And I remember, not in a macabre way, but I remember thinking I really enjoyed talking about the plaster of Paris people. And I don't mean it, because obviously that can be seen as quite macabre. But what really struck me was that, through archaeology, you were reaching out to the past and to a person that was struck down in an event in the position that they'd died in, their last final moments. And you could see what they were wearing. You could see their final moments. Of some of them are, what struck me was being together, lots of family members together, huddled people together. And there was something in that made me just get interested. And I remember being fascinated by other projects that we did, Roman archaeology, people, life in a Roman house. And I think that's kind of my first moments of really, if I look back with hindsight, that's when I started really understanding and knowing that I liked a bit of history and archaeology. My dad did history and politics at university, so it was always a family thing. We were always taken to castles and, always at a National Trust. I was up in the northwest, so some of the staples were Dun and Massey and Quarrybank Mill, places like that, and we just used to spend lots of weekends doing stuff like that. So it was kind of there in the inkling, and without a doubt, my son can't do the same thing. Walk past a hole without having a good old peep, because ultimately we are really nosy people. And I think that really defines me and defines me in my job, because I'm a very nosy person. I like to know what people are up to, because I'm always behind the scenes, and I kind of like it that way. That's why some people probably have never even heard of me and don't know anything really about what I do, because I think in the Time Team photos, I'm just an elbow next to Matt Williams.
A mighty fine elbow at that.
It's very. You try and find a picture of me other than the ones that are the main frame ones. I hide away, but so that kind of interest had always been there, and so then, stop me if I'm really yarning on, but basically that history, I did the usual history, GCSE and A-level, and obviously again being in the industrial north, our history teachers were really excited by Industrial Revolution. And although I can tell you loads about it, I love it. I mean, I love all sorts of bits of history. I love everything, really. I love being really specific and finding out lots of different details. I forget them just as easy, but it wasn't really cutting the mustard. And I have to give a big shout out to my history teachers, Mr. Reed and Mrs. Hall, because they really inspired me, particularly Mr. Reed. But ultimately, when I was 15, I actually went on an archaeological dig. So somewhere along the line, archaeology popped its head, and I don't know whether it was my mum that kind of signed me off or whatever, but basically I joined a bunch of old guys doing an archaeological dig, a Roman road, and they were desperate to find a marching camp in between Ribchester and I'm not sure, Manchester. I'm not sure the route, because I was, being 15, I hadn't really paid a huge heap of attention. I kind of just went along with them, and they really did inspire me. I mean, they were obsessed by their military, but what they did for me was start me off digging and start me off being involved in archaeology. And one particular, Mr. Reed came with me. He was a really good teacher. So we went and dug this Roman road, and it was actually that bit of archaeology that we dug. We dug about 2 meters down, and I remember it well because we got down to a turf layer, and I am, as well as being a nosy Parker, a complete and utter geek, which I'm really pleased by listening to all your podcasts, you like to admit quite freely as well. So being a geek, I put a piece of that turf into a St. Ivel butter box. I don't think they even sell St. Ivel anymore, and kept it. And I continued doing archaeology with these wonderful people who I've not seen for many years, but one of them, Colin Harding, was very influential in me getting into university as well in the future. But I kept that piece of turf, and it came in useful because on the side, GCSEs, Industrial Revolution done, I made a decision that I was going to go and do archaeology. And I enjoyed art, I enjoyed drama, so these kind of play a little bit of a part later on. I am yarning, you can cut out whatever you want, but I was actually really good at art, and I nearly went to go and do art as a degree. I was super keen to get into Durham, and I'd said to my art teacher, if I don't get into Durham doing archaeology, whatever you want, go and do an art foundation course in fine art, because I was good at art. And to be honest, yeah, it's an incredible place, and it had a huge impact on me. And the reason why I saw turf, I think I got in because I actually took that piece of turf interview to Professor Rowley Conway, again an amazing person, into what was their old department, because I'm ancient, so I was there when they had their department on the Bailey, and they actually, it was the only archaeological department at that time that actually had archaeology in it. I remember him telling me that. And I took this piece of turf, like a geek, and told him all about it. And maybe that's what got me in. That, and Colin Harding wrote me a spanking reference, which was really, really good of him. So I got into Durham, and it changed me because coming from the industrial northwest from Bolton, really great people. But when I got to Durham, people who were just like me, and it's a small, or it was a small university, 1,000 people, and the archaeology department was only probably about 70 people at that time. Close-knit community, people who were really passionate about archaeology, but what was really important, a really good friendship group. And to that extent, I'm really still quite close with a lot of those people now. And a lot of those people, so you probably know some of them. Dr. Tom Moore, who's at Durham now, it was one of my peer group. Rachel Pope, Dr. Rachel Pope,
yeah,
friend of mine, who pointed out the other day when I put up on our picture of Time Team family, she said, but we're first archaeology family.
Got in there quickly. I saw
Yeah,
that.
she got in there. But that kind of, her saying that reminded me that that's what we were. We spent all our time together in the pub mostly, having a jolly good time, doing archaeology, living and breathing archaeology, and just, doing what we do now on Time Team, which is just being close and having, and just, just talking about archaeological digs, and just, really, we drank a lot as well, to be honest. But so it was really good times, and I did an undergraduate in archaeology there. And with some great people, Helena Hamerow, who's a really big name on our Time Team front, Pam Graves, Sam Lucy, Colin Hasselgraves. There were some really, really big names in that department at the time, and I'm probably missing lots of really incredible people like Matthew Johnson. And I enjoyed it. I was there, archaeology, social sec, and general busybody. I knew and just loved it. So loved it so much that I stayed on. I stayed on and did a medieval archaeology master's as well, and both of those degrees really stood me in good stead for the future. And I can honestly say, because I heard you say the other day, Lawrence, that you sounded like you had an archaeology a university time like I did, where you probably had a really good time drinking.
Good time.
Probably not doing as many lectures as that you probably should have been doing. So,
sounds familiar.
Yeah, so it was a bit like that, because I have learnt a lot through the jobs, a lot more through the jobs that I've subsequently done, and look back and always kick myself thinking, you stupid person, just go to that lecture and go and listen a little bit more, because what do you know when you're 18? You go to the pub, don't you? But I had a really good time. During my time also at Durham, I did also produce a lot of plays as well. So that's kind of where I'm giving you the background to what subsequently happened. I always was interested in performance. I'd done drama at school. I'm rubbish at learning lines. Another good reason why a camera is just not me. I'm behind the scenes. So directing and producing plays I loved, and I did a bit of that when I first came to London as well. So, and I'd always kind of thought, somewhere along the line I wanted to merge those two together. But like I said at the beginning, I didn't know where I was going, and listening to other people say the same, we all kind of, in the early days, you kind of have an idea, you know what you like, but you don't know where you're going, and it kind of sort of bubbles along. But with hindsight, I was looking before I came on at what I've done, and it's weird because there's a kind of structure there as well. I kind of, you're talking about luck at the beginning, and you make your own. I think you have to be quite determined in the business that I'm in, probably even archaeology, but like media is really, it can be really cutthroat. Documentaries, the genre is is where I found my home. But other genres that I have worked in, I can talk about that, but I worked at BBC drama. Basically, looking back at my career, I kind of see that structure is there. But at the time, it seems all piecemeal, because living in the north, I knew that I had to get to London. So I'd done my degree, I loved it, I nearly did a PhD, but I knew I was ready to move on. I think that was it for me at that time, and it was probably the best choice. I'd love to go back and like all of you, but I think I wanted to do some kind of media thing. So I came down to London. There's work in now in Manchester, but kind of the bright lights, the big city. I know that Neil Emanuel had talked about, he sounded like he had quite a similar start to me. You come down to London, you scrabble and try and do anything that you can, and if one of your listeners is listening and wants to do something like what I've done, that kind of job, working in TV, but archaeology TV or whatever, it's quite hard to break into. I knew no one in the media industry. Mum and dad thought I was barking mad, didn't really understand what I wanted to do. They wanted, go and get a proper job, whatever. But I went down and I had a few running jobs when I first came down.
Just Karen, it feels like there's a bridge missing here, because you've done your degree, you've done your masters.
Yeah.
And what was the spark, or what was there even a spark? What led you to going to London to want to do, or what was it even wanting to do archaeology TV? Or
so I kind of loved my archaeology, my history, and I was obsessed with, I grew up with Mr. Darcy, Colin Firth, right? Pride and Prejudice, and I just adored all of those BBC dramas. There was a massive phase of period dramas and films that, Pride. I think I've still got the video or the DVD here of Pride and Prejudice. It meant a lot to me. I watched it over and over again, and what it was about it that I always fancied being in that time period. But I thought that's what I want to make. I want to do period dramas. That's in my head. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And I also wanted to work at the BBC. BBC I wanted as my first job. And so yeah, that's kind of what London, because that's where it's all made. Television centre, the drama department was opposite that, doing drama series, films, all clubbed together. And so I came down with not much money, and had to cobble it together a little bit, rents, and renting a room in a house with a friend of mine, and I sending off your CV. That's how we did it. No emails. You wrote. I remember going into like some weird computer center and just cobbling, wrote the letter and got there's a book called Pact, which is basically all of the people sign up to this. Companies used to sign up to it, whether they do now, possibly they do. And you just went through like it's a directory. And I just sent off my CV to all, hundreds of companies. Please give me a job. This is what I've done. I put in loads of stuff about producing plays and whatever. And nobody really wrote back. And it was really difficult. And not knowing anyone, it was just really hard. And I tried for ages to get in. And then it is who you know, because I went to a party and a guy said, we're looking for a runner. And it was a BBC job. It was on a sports comedy programme on BBC Choice. With a guy called, you might know the presenter, it was Dominic Diamond. He's the games master, right?
Yeah, I remember.
Lovely guy, absolute heart of gold, feisty Scottish guy, but he was a really generous man, and it was a really good position to have got, but it was in sports comedy. But I'd achieved one goal, luck. That's what you were talking about, luck. My first job in TV was at the BBC, So I made it that far, and I did that. And then, you know, it's all contractual. It is a cutthroat business. That contract came to an end. It was a weird show. It was like fighting mascots and
I think I remember it.
Do you remember it? Yeah. So like my job was, do you? So my job was really weird, as with most of the jobs that you ever do in this industry, is that I had to source things like you know, crap merchandise that's football teams like Spurs. I went to the Spurs shop and they have really crap aftershave.
I mean, Spurs have everything crap, Karen. I just highlight that because they are not Arsenal football.
Oh no, my husband's a Spurs. Yeah, just like sourcing crap, getting audiences in, you know, oh, I can't even remember, just like really weird stuff. And you know, it wasn't sport, you know. I wasn't the best runner, to be honest. But then that job ended. It was really nice, but they always do, they come to an end. And somebody picked up my CV, and so the next job I took was with Prince Edward and Prince Edward's company. So Ardent Productions needed a runner, and so I ended up, and this is a bit closer to home, and I worked on a program called Tales from the Tower, which went out on the History Channel, and it was a 6 1 hours documenting the history, like specific stories from the Tales of London, dramatized. So it was a docudrama, and it was all done on Prince Edward's estate. And so I was doing, and it was you know, with hindsight, actually, I was run ragged. So I always used to think at the time, I'm a really crap runner. But actually, the amount of jobs that I was catering for 60 people, as well as I was in it. I dressed up, I was in it. So if you look carefully, you can see me in a lot of it. I was making blood, I was helping the art department, I was helping costume, I was driving actors around, you know, you name it, I was doing it. And now that we have such lovely catering on Time Team, I kind of see that a runner shouldn't have been catering for 60 people. I literally was catering for 60 people. So I did that. And, you know, as I said, to try and cut a long story short, the early part is really difficult. So I kind of thought, I'm not really getting anywhere here. And so it was at that point, I think, that I then went and worked at Museum of London, because that's obviously my other string to my bow. I was an archaeologist. And so again, talking about your luck, we'd studied when I was at university a lot of that in London, great burial sites in the centre of London, Bishopsgate. And you know, it'd been excavated since the late 80s. I know you know, some really interesting Roman burials had been found, lead coffins, because that's, you know, that had been what we'd been taught. But by the time I got to it, it was plague pits. So we were digging lots and lots of dead bodies. But kind of, I was quite in my element with that, because you know, some people can do it, some people can't. Because I kind of, there was part of me would have liked to have done forensic archaeology. So that was kind of up my street. So I did that probably for about 6 months. And actually, you know, again, even though it's all been all over the place, when I look back at my career is happening is all the jigsaw pieces are starting to come together. So, you know, I'd done my time as a runner, and I was never a runner again after that. But also doing the archaeology has stood me in good stead as being an actual archaeologist within a trench. I also met, while I was at Museum of London, which is one of the jigsaw pieces, some key people who you will also know, we may know, you'll certainly know Raksha Dave. So Raksha was there with me, and that's how we met. So
amazing.
She's a very old friend of mine, and older than Time Team. She was actually my bridesmaid at my wedding.
Oh.
Yeah. So we are quite close.
Well, you need to tell her to reply to our request to come on Career Rings.
Oh, yeah, I will. Yeah, no, I will.
Yeah.
I'll tell her
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. So
not
you'll
to
have her.
interrupt your
You will
career
have her. I
rings.
will deliver her to you. And then also Time Team people will know David Thorpe and Kat Edwards, who also did they were diggers in the early noughties on Time Team. So they had been plucked by Time Team doing archaeology, and so that was that. But I have to say, one of the reasons why I didn't keep going, and it does all fit into place, you'll see, is that in my trench, in my hole, and I've heard other people say this about commercial archaeology, you're a little digger in a big picture, and you don't always get talked to, and you don't know what's going on, and you certainly don't know the whole being of the and workings of the site. I enjoyed it, but I found it difficult being just that little person. So that was another thing that kind of put me off, which now that I'm doing what I do, when I go to sites, this is what I love. And that's one of the driving factors, is that I'm now that person who gets the site tour around there. I meet the director of the dig. I chat to that person. They tell me everything that they know about their site. And I go and see the people and I watch them dig. And it's a different place. And I like that. I like that about my job. But so it was only a matter of time before I realised that as much as I really love archaeology and I love digging, Time Team has allowed me to dig on occasion. Certainly when I was a researcher and assistant producer, I was digging, certainly on day 3 when things are kind of needing to be moved and progressed. So yeah, lost my thread. What was I talking about before that? I'm not waffling.
No, this is great. So I think we're just at the point where you're leaving commercial archaeology and not being the little person, and that ambition, that drive, and that nosiness is sending you to a point that you want to make.
So basically, a job had come up in BBC Drama, so I'd seen it. So it was an assistant to producers, and I applied for it. And I'll cut that long story short, I got it. And I got that job that I had really wanted to come to London. That was my driving force to come to London, to get into the drama department, to see if I could get to be a producer making dramas for the BBC. Now, BBC tend to be quite cyclical in their output. And obviously I arrived at a time where period dramas were on the way. We did as part of Daniel Deronda and Charles II, The Power and the Passion. I can't say that I had a huge role. I was assistant to the producers that did, but that job allowed me to, and it was really quite good in that sense. And so I just did, they did. And obviously I worked there for a long time, but again, cutting that long story short, it was a point when I was reading the script for Charles II's Power and the Passion, and the writer, who's really famous, Adrian Hodges, came in and he said to me, well, what do you think of the script? Because you're in a really good position, you're there in the front door of the producers. And what had put me off it, and I didn't say that rudely or anything, but and that's where I realized that I kind of probably was in the wrong place, was that the facts were all wrong. And he'd written about Barbara Villiers, who's the mistress of Charles II, and I don't think it actually ever made it into the actual drama. I don't think I ever saw it when it finally came out. And it was like basically Barbara Villiers defaced a saint in a naughty sexual way, and I just didn't like that. The documentary filmmaker in me was kind of going, but that's not right, that's not factually correct, you can't say that. And I don't know, I just got turned off it. And, I said to him, so, that you can't, that's not actually correct. And he said, darling, that's artistic license, darling. So really, I kind of at that point knew that I probably needed to move over to documentaries. And I went out in the field in the BBC. I was a production secretary, and I did a few actual dramas out. I did something called Paradise with Ralph Little, Charles Dale, and Neil Morrissey, and I did that. And it was during when I was working on that my old friends, David Thorpe and Kat Edwards, called me and said, we need a digger on Time Team. And so because I was living in London and not far from where they were doing it was at Kew Gardens. So my first little role on Time Team was actually as a digger on this programme. And so I was there digging, and I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'd taken a break. It was Queen's birthday or something. We had 4 days off at the BBC because they give you that at that point. And so I did this Kew Gardens dig. I met Tony and I met everybody, and I had a really good time, and I really liked it. And they liked me. And funnily enough, I don't think Tim, but he invited me to go to Derbyshire potholing and rock climbing for what I found out afterwards was the pilot of extreme archaeology. So he went, do you fancy going pothole and rock climbing? And I went, yeah, that sounds good. I'll come along. And so a group of us went up to Derbyshire, and that was Alice Roberts, Bridget. So I met loads of people before I even really got in. Alice, Jim Murrah, Bridget, Kat and David, and I can't remember who, Anise, I can't remember really who else. But because I hadn't been told it was a pilot, I kept out of the way. So you'll never see me in that either. So they filmed their pilot for extreme archaeology. I went potholing and rock climbing. I loved it. And I was with my friends, had a really good time. And yeah, that was really good. But then I went back to the BBC and just carried on with my job. But I realised that, documentaries was my home. And so Time Team had always been in the background of my life. I'd grown up with it. I then applied. So I applied to it. And I applied to get a job on it, see whether they got anything. And cut that long story short, I got invited for interview to Time Team, and I got invited in by Simon Rakes and Philip Clark. And I gave it my best shot, because this is what I wanted. I knew this was it. This was what I wanted. I've been banging on the door in BBC documentary, and I got nowhere with that either. They were like, oh, well, you can't really slide over from drama. They didn't like crossing over. So I was in drama, and I was stuck in drama, and they saw me as a drama person.
Oh, there's a whole load to squeeze in there, Karen. You were worried at the start that you wouldn't have enough to say. But
I know. Well,
I
knew this would go one of two ways. I knew that I'd either clam up and not be able to tell you anything and just go, or this would happen.
One of the things that made me the most happy throughout you chatting there was, I think you might be the first person we've had on the podcast who switched to archaeology as the more stable career.
Yeah. Oh.
But I definitely, the little digger in a big picture sentiment it's something that I think many have felt. It came up today even. I went to a seminar with one of our brilliant PhD students, Alice, who's talking about different ways of storytelling and doing archaeology. And one of the biggest frustrations still at Mola, in fact, is this kind of not necessarily seeing the context, seeing the story you're helping to tell. And just going back to luck very briefly, it's one of the reasons I consider myself lucky to have been in the field with one of our old interviewees, Gareth Chafee. Do you remember chatting to him, Lawrence? And he insisted on every day showing us what was going on the site, what the stories were, what every section, every little intervention we did was giving him to help tell the story of the site. And I really loved it. But without that, with the absence of that, it was one of the reasons I went off and pursued a different career.
Did you find the same then? Sorry.
Yeah, very, very much. I realized the further I went up in that part of the profession, the further away from doing the both doing the archaeology, but also asking the question and trying to get the whole big picture. And that for me is one of the best bits about Time Team, because you get it in the space of 3 days. It's blooming amazing.
Yeah. Time Team is incredible. It gives you that. It's for me. It's that joy, and because that's what happened. I became a researcher on Time Team, and suddenly everything kind of tied together. Documentaries is my home for sure. I mean, I don't think I've strayed. I've gone into news a bit, but funnily enough, within news, I'm that, and the story on archaeology is. And so I did all the archaeology stories, which I just have to hasten to add, always get the bigger numbers. So they always used to do the numbers at the BBC, and the archaeology segment always got the bigger numbers, way over the numbers. But
Nice.
Good.
That is a good news story. That is a good news story. So 2003, you said you started with Time Team, and were you there until 2014 when it sort of came to an end?
No, it wasn't. So no, and I don't think anybody was who was all that way through, because it moved to Cardiff in 2010. But 2012, I think. So my story is that in March 2003, Time Team gave me that dream job, the break that I wanted, into documentaries, and I was their researcher. And we were quite a huge production team then. We're not like that now. It's just me and Emily and Rebecca and Felix. Back then, I mean, Time Team still is and always was a well-oiled machine. Let me tell you that. And that's behind the scenes as well as when you're on the shoot. I mean, when you're on the shoot, it's like a juggernaut. If you've not done your work, good luck to you. But so there was two teams, and it was an AP, assistant producer, and a researcher. Or one team, assistant producer and a researcher, another team, a cameo AP, and each of those teams then used to work with a director. And what we did is we had 13 shoots, as you know, and we used to leapfrog. So we had a month to research the site, go and wreck it, have a look at it, get all the maps, get everything that we needed. And back then we didn't do any geophysics. It was a rare beast that John got in there early. It was, 3 days was 3 days. And, it still is. But sometimes we do a little bit more geophysics behind, in the run up, just, because we are a slightly smaller team. So, we had this month where we got it all in order, and, it was lucky dip what you got. The sites at that point when I arrived there had already been sorted, and we just did it. And so you had this month. So every 2 weeks, the Time Team was being filmed between March and October, and we just, went through. And it was also lucky dip what director you got, and what the site was. So yeah, my first dig with them was, with Michael Douglas. So it was really good. But yeah, so that's how it happened. What do you want to know? Because I don't want
the Michael Douglas.
Yeah. Oh no, Doog. So he became to. Yeah, I know. That's probably why it goes by Doog.
I was like, I don't remember that Time Team episode. This was obviously a springboard then, Karen, to take you on to so many things that Derek mentioned in your introduction, with so many fantastic big hitting headlines, not just in Time Team but elsewhere.
So basically I came on as a researcher and did that, but then I stayed on to develop the sites for the next series. So instead of going at the end of that contract, they kept me on. So really I was there for 4 years straight in the end. The next job was finding the sites with a good colleague of mine, Ollie Twinch, and really nerve-wracking, to be honest, finding the sites, because that's what I do now. on Time Team, finding the sites, figuring out whether it's got the story, will it hold up, what we're going to find. So I was doing that really early on as a researcher, and we did that over the winter period, and then I went back onto the next series. So I did 2 series of Time Team, and then after that I got picked to do documentary specials. So probably glossing over this a little bit, because I did a couple of years doing that, and I worked with some amazing people, and really within all that is my absolute best job, I think.
Well, is this something you're proud of? Because we got to hold on to that.
Well, well, it's kind of it was good, because at that time, so we had 4 documentary specials a year, and so Channel 4 gave us 4 hours, and my job in doing them with a director, because I was assistant producer by this time, I got promoted to assistant producer, was finding those stories. And so that gave me the opportunity to really have a good think about what I wanted to do, what stories, what archaeological stories I, could tell within this brilliant, piece of airtime that Channel 4 had just, because we were really doing well. That was, at the time when I was at Time Team, really was the halcyon. I don't know, everybody will say that about their own time, but I believe, and I think that quite a lot of people would concur, if that's the right word, that this period was like a really golden time. So we were making loads, and it was really good time. And so I had these 4 hours, and I cut this long story short, is that I pitched the Jamestown documentary special, which was really interesting. It was the birthplace of America in Jamestown, and it was a really fascinating dig, and we got the opportunity to join them, and it was just incredible what they were finding. Stuff that they were finding over there in the bottom of a well was better, because the people who'd gone out there had come from the UK, that the archaeology that they found over there was better than what had been, than some of the archaeological collections here in the comparison, because they just literally went out there, and then they were, the site only was in use for 90 years. So we even know, who was living there. It was just a really amazing site. In the bottom of the well, they found like a loaded pistol, a halberd that was bent, a shoe. They knew who the shoe belonged to. It was a child's shoe. It was just incredible. And it was such an amazing site that it was the year that we were doing the big royal dig at Time Team, and the Queen, that people had met the Queen and the royal party when they were doing the big royal dig. And I think somebody had just said because they knew that the Queen was going to go out to visit Virginia, and somehow, because it wasn't me, I think it might have been the director, Brendan Hughes, said that the Queen should go to Jamestown and go and have a look at it, because it's incredible. She shouldn't just go to Virginia. Go and have a look at this amazing archaeological dig. She did, which was really interesting.
That's
she
nice.
changed her route. So I did that, and I did Secrets of the Stately Garden, which I'm quite proud of. I don't
Well, is this a good time to move on to our set questions? I don't want to cut you short with your career, but no, it's great. We could talk to you for hours, Karen. There's so many things. I want to know more about the Titanic story. I want to know more about Secrets of Stonehenge, of which both Derek and I were both involved with. But yeah, we obviously have our set 3 questions, and it'd be remiss not to get them in our allocated time for this podcast. So I guess the first question is tell us of this fantastic career that you've carved out for yourself. What is there something is it a piece of work, or is it it's going to be a piece of work, but yeah, what stands out?
So when there's a few things, isn't there? I mean, there's so many different things that I've done that to pick one would be a disservice to others. Each of the programs that I've done, I'm proud of the fact that I was picked. Titanic is one of those things, events in world history that I just was fascinated with as a child. So to be chosen to make a program that we worked on for a year to do that, and I went and saw a bit of Titanic. I didn't want to do what Tony did, which was the same year actually. He went down with James Cameron to actually go and see Titanic. I just went to Las Vegas. My bit of Titanic was actually in Las Vegas. But I'm proud of the fact that I went to Siberia, and that was probably the most remote that I've been, and I'm proud of that because it was really, again, it was another. Once I've done Time Team, it's like, what do you do next when you've done your dream job? But there's subjects, isn't there? And I'd always wanted to go to Siberia and going to look for a viable cell, which is what the purpose of it all was, for reconstructing a mammoth, because we went out there with some scientists from South Korea and Russian scientists who were looking. They were going to the Arctic Circle, looking in the permafrost, where we went to two sites, Batagaica and another one. I can't remember what it was called. It was deep into the permafrost. I mean, we travelled up the Yana River with no contact to the outside world from Yakutsk. We took a medical guy with us. I mean, we were remote. I mean, it was I wouldn't do it now, but I'm proud that I've done it. And we went and we found bits of mammoth and mammoth tusks and met extraordinary people. And, it kind of meeting those people has, the nosiness in me and the kind of wanting to see what, and the traveling. I mean, you're right. I could probably go on forever, but like that is one of my proudest moments for being extreme. But in terms of project, it's a Time Team one, because I think the henge that we did in the Durrington Walls, Secrets of Stonehenge, is that the right title? Can't remember.
Secrets of Stonehenge, Skeletons Bringing Back the Dead.
Oh, the Skeletons is a different one. Oh. Yeah, Journey to Stonehenge.
Journey to Stonehenge.
So the Henge Monument in Journey to Stonehenge is something that I can be quite proud of, because it was our largest, and it's not the largest, I shouldn't say that, it was the largest experimental replica that certainly Time Team had done. And it was really good.
So this was reconstructing the Southern Circle, that was based on archaeological evidence and excavations of things you reconstructed. Because I remember seeing the program, and both Derek and I worked on the Stonehenge Riverside part of, but not. I came the year after that, and Derek was in our lab in Manchester, Sheffield somewhere. Nerd, beat him up. But but so this was rebuilding this fantastic Neolithic timber circle, effectively.
Yeah, from scratch. So my job, I don't know, project manager is probably too glorified, because I work with Kerry Ely. Kerry, cat's trying to get banging. So I worked with Kerry on it, and the late Ian Barclay. They and a runner called Dom, who was on the Time team, and they did the graft. So did the army. We got the army in to do the first two timbers. So we got them on an A-frame, and then they, brute force pulled it up. So we wanted to see what it really was like, how it would have, how they would have done it, and how easy it was. And it proved that it wasn't easy. And then the rest of it was done by Digger, and we built it up. But my job was to kind of bring that together. I remember the first job was sourcing the trees, ringing up forest companies and sort of trying to figure out what the best wood would be. So we chose poplar in the end. So poplar's the straightest, quick growing. I managed to get them all for free, because they were really, because we had to be really specific with the dimensions. It was great. It was a nerve-wracking moment when, arrival day, but they came over the crest of the hill and they arrived, and it was like thrilling to actually see them there. And so over a week, it took us a week to put that together, and it was just incredible. And I tell you, what was good was the camaraderie of pulling it together. and doing it and it being a big monument, but then it's standing in a field and it actually working. So I was talking about this to somebody not so long ago, because by the reason why we do experiments like this is because it's not just about going through the motions and doing it and replicating that. This was really good. How it caught the sun, we aligned it with, I think Clive Ruggles had I think he did all the alignments and did all the
theodolite out.
Not team. I can't take credit for it all at all. There was a lot of people who came together to do this, and what was really good, we left it over a weekend. It was all finished, and put hay in between all the poles, and left it. And then we lived down there for ages because we were doing a lot of filming down there. We came back after the weekend on the Monday, and what really struck me was that you could walk any way you wanted through that monument, because it was, there were just timbers stuck in the ground. There were holes through them all. We hadn't sort of preempted thinking, oh, it's got a roof on it or it's got walls. We didn't do that. We just did the poles because that's what was in the archaeology that was in the ground. But the hay enabled us to see that all those people who visited it, because it was free for people just to come, and it was just in a field that we'd hired, you could come and walk around it. People had done exactly the same thing. They'd clearly walked in and turned left and followed it round, because even though you could go straight through if you wanted, the hay showed us where people had been walking. And it was just sort of it was just really interesting. And if you want to see a picture of that, it's in the British Museum, which I saw the other day.
Nice. I know quite a well-established professor who's based out of Southampton University, who I won't name, who accidentally burnt some of your timber circle.
Very naughty little boy.
Accidentally on purpose.
He got told off.
Yeah, I bet. That is such a good thing to, and not many people can say they've done such a fantastic and large reconstructed archaeological project. And I'm going to pass over to Derek to the next bit because my dog's going mad, so I don't want everyone to hear it barking over me.
Yeah, no worries. So obviously that's done pride, but we always move on to envy next in the podcast. And you've worked with some incredible people in a huge variety of contexts, so I'm particularly excited to see what it is or who it is or what project or what thing that someone else has done that you're particularly envious of, Karen.
Well, yeah, I knew you were going to ask that, so I did have a think. And one of the things that I haven't done that probably would have been also a dream would have been to work, even though it's not archaeologically related, it's the natural world, but and the BBC do it very well, to work with David Attenborough. There's all these incredible projects that he's done, and a few of the colleagues that I have worked with, because being an archaeologist and a media person, you are quite specialized. So there's a little group of us who have a very niche amount of skills. So we very much bubble along doing similar jobs. So I know there's a couple of people who I know who have been and worked with David Attenborough, and that's something that I wouldn't say that I'm envious, because I'm really lucky with what I've done, and I'm even if I hang my hat up and don't do anything else, I can say that some of the things that I've done is just like taking me across the world, and it's been amazing. But that is something that I would have liked to have done. But there was one person that I work with on Digging for Britain, who so I know her a little bit, because she was on Time Team a long time ago, and obviously Digging for Britain. But Alice Roberts, like, great admiration for her, and she's got a cracking career, and wow, what an intelligent person. I think she's the kind of person that you wish that she was your big sister. She's just incredible, really talented in whatever she does. you know, from art to whatever. So if there was ever a little bit of greenness, it would be, he's just so incredible. I wish I was her sometimes.
Oh, that's a fantastic envy, and a very, very sensible one. And at some point in the future, we will find a way of getting Alice Roberts on the podcast.
Oh, okay, yeah,
The great white whale of career and ruins, if you will. Although she's met my dad, weirdly.
Gee,
Yeah, she
right,
came and did.
you're touching.
She came
Yeah,
and
but
did some
Richard's a
filming on the
legend.
farm.
Richard's a
Oh,
legend.
they
You're not,
filmed on
mate.
the farm. Oh, right, brilliant.
Yeah, just some sweeping drone B-roll around the harbour. They came down.
When was that? This year?
Last year, I think I was in Greece at the time, so I missed it. But yeah, my dad was very happy.
Yeah, she's really nice. She's such a lovely person. I really enjoyed working with her. I mean, we didn't work. She just did the studio stuff because obviously when I was doing Digging for Britain, it was all video diaries and stuff, and went on BBC4. When it went to BBC2, then she kind of went back out again and did a bit more. So she was just doing our studio bits, and obviously the main, we'd go to a museum and she presented that. So, but yeah, incredible person, just, you know, super talented.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we're coming into the home straight here, Karen. We've got a working time machine that Derek and I have got ready and raring to go. You got a return ticket. Where would you like to take it and why?
So obviously there's so many places that you can go. But again, thinking about this, and it's a bit random, but I would like to go back to 1941 Blitz, London, which is a bit weird, probably, because it's a bit dangerous. But what I'm interested in is not necessarily the bombing raids and you know, the destruction, but the camaraderie. And it's that kind of great British spirit that we saw perhaps a little bit of during COVID. And, you know, I do absolutely love sort of 1940s and wartime history anyway, but I just really would find it fascinating to go back and sort of see how that make do and mend, you know, British spirit, how that would have been. I'd often kind of thought that probably born in the wrong time, but you know, 1900s would have been a perfect time to sort of see the world tick through. So I think, you know, Blitz time would be interesting, and just to see how people, you know, coming together in a really, I think that would be really interesting. That moment when the Sutton Hoo ship burial was put into the ground. I'd really like to have been there. That was an event, and I just really like to know, was he in there?
I think you're, as if I remember correctly, you're there with. So yeah, you two,
oh really?
you two can That's great. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I think it's so valuable to be able to see and understand the variations of roles within archaeological media and historic environment media and science communication, that you don't always have to be in front of the camera, but actually there's a really important role in doing the research and identifying the stories and making sure it's proper science and not just fictional. What was it your writer described it as? Something or other, darling, creative license, darling, but yeah, being factual, artistic license, that's it. Yeah, but actually there are professionals, there are experts, and there are people with loads and loads of experience that are working bloody hard behind the scenes to make these quality content and do the archaeology justice and do the profession justice. And I think it was really important for us to be able to share your career in ruins in that way, Karen.
Yeah, indeed, it's the people that make it. It's interesting.
Thank you, Karen. That was absolutely wonderful. And I was lost in the story of your career. It was absolutely brilliant to hear from beginning to end. And that just leaves me really to wrap up the podcast. And as is tradition, thank all of our listeners for tuning in. We genuinely appreciate every single listen we get. We do it for one listen, but we get 2 or 3 more than that, so we're very happy about that. And thank you to our loyal band of Patreons who continue to allow us to pay our hosting fees on time. Without you, it wouldn't be possible to carry on doing Career in Ruins. So thank you very much. And keep listening. We got lots more exciting people coming.